Welcome to the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast.
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 Welcome to the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast with me, Dr. Janine Anderson. Heads up, this show may contain adult language and may mention specific foods. If you find either of those to be too triggering, I trust you to take care of yourself and do what you need to do. This podcast is sponsored by Ipono Maui and ED Care. Ipono Maui is led by internationally renowned expert on eating disorders, Dr. Anita Johnston. Located in a home-like oceanfront facility in beautiful Maui, Hawaii, Ipono offers residential, partial hospitalization, and intensive outpatient treatment for eating disorders. Visit iponomaui.com, spelled AIPONOMAUI, to learn more. ED Care has provided PHP, IOP, and outpatient treatment for all genders 18 and over since 2001. CAMSA, which stands for Connection, Acceptance, Mindfulness, Sense of Self, and Action, is ED Care's mindfulness-based treatment approach and is incorporated into each individualized treatment plan. Facilities are located in Denver, Colorado Springs, and Kansas City, and all treatment is supported by master's-level clinicians or higher. ED Care offers 4 specialty tracks for binge eating disorder, elite athletes, substance use, and trauma. And the Connections House, an affordable supportive housing component, adds an extra layer of supervised support. Visit eatingdisorder.care or call 866-771-0861. Hey friends, today I wanted to talk with you briefly about one of the most popular topics that people ask me about, which is motivation. How do I get motivated and how do I stay motivated for recovery? And this episode is a little bit more geared toward motivation around changing your behaviors, which I know can be extremely difficult to do and is obviously something that has to happen if you do want to have recovery and full recovery for sure. So I'm going to go over 4 main points about motivation, how you can increase it, and how you can get motivated if you're in one of those really stuck places where you just don't want to do it at all. So the first point I want to make about motivation is that we really need to look at our expectations for what our motivation level should or could be. So when people are telling me I'm not motivated for recovery, I just don't want to do it, and therefore I'm not doing anything to change the way that I interact with food or other things, but mainly we're going to focus on food in this one. One of the first things I talk with them about is what is the expectation? Because I think a lot of us approach motivation in this way, and I know I certainly do a lot of the time too, that I love it when I'm super motivated to do something that's otherwise kind of aversive that I don't want to do, and the mood just strikes me. So for example, this is how I feel about cleaning. I like things clean. I don't actually enjoy cleaning that much. I really wish I were a person that did, but I'm not. So if I want my house to be clean, I could approach it in a couple of different ways. So I could wait for that motivation to strike me. And then as soon as one of those rare instances comes along where I'm like, man, I would like nothing more than to wipe down my kitchen counters, I could go do that then. However, that's not going to really help me to keep my place as clean as I want it to be. Or I can flip the script and say, I actually don't wait to feel motivated. So I don't wait for my mood to change to go do something. So I think that this is probably one of the biggest stuck points for people, is that we're all secretly waiting around to feel really motivated and to feel amped up to go do something difficult. And I think that that is the exception, not the rule. It certainly does happen, but it doesn't happen frequently enough. And definitely if you're working on something in recovery, like, okay, I've got to increase my food intake, it's not that frequent that the mood is going to strike you to say, yeah, I'm ready to go eat more food than my eating disorder wants me to. Or if you're working on interrupting some behaviors and you need to eat a meal mindfully, and you know that that's going to be a tough go of it the first time, it's probably not as likely that you're going to be really jazzed to go do that. But if you want to do it and you have to do it more frequently than you are now, a lot more frequently, maybe we have to work on saying, I can't wait for the mood to strike me. I have to go do it anyway. So I call this acting as if. So act as if you are motivated to go do these tough things. They are tough. They do suck. Some parts of recovery are totally awful. I get it. I hear it all the time. And if ultimately you really do want to recover, you have to do it anyway. So that's my number one tip is quit waiting for the mood to strike you and go act as if you were motivated and act as if you were all pumped up and ready to do these tough things. The second major thing I want to talk with you about is adding more support. So this can happen in a lot of different ways, but I think people struggle with motivation for all the things that they need to do in recovery, especially hard when nobody else is involved in their process or minimal people are involved. So if you don't have somebody who can be a buddy to you, a good friend that you can go talk to, if you don't have a parent you can talk to, if you don't feel really connected to your treatment team, or maybe you don't have a treatment team, you could do something as minimal as get an app, get on an online support group. There are tons of them on Facebook. This podcast has one on Facebook that you could go talk to people in. Having more support helps us to feel more motivated because we feel less alone. And it reminds us that other people are rooting for us. And sometimes the people who are our support people have that same goal too. They're also trying to recover. And we can use that energy from both people in this fun, synergistic kind of way. We're both trying to do this hard thing and get to this awesome place that's just a really tough journey to get there. So if you don't have enough support and you're struggling with motivation, I would tell you to try and think about ways that you can increase your support. And again, I've even had people who have really struggled with being isolated because of whatever kind of circumstances in their life that make it hard to have enough folks around them. And in that case, I would say use the internet and resources, even if it means you get an app like Recovery Record or something, and then it gives you little reminders to do what you need to do with food. That can be a way of increasing support. So get creative with it and make sure that you're trying not to go it alone and that you get more people involved in your process. Very similarly, my third tip is increasing accountability. So this can be pretty tough and you need to talk this through with your treatment team if you have one and people in your life who know you best, and also to think through it for yourself. Who do you want to be holding you accountable? So for a lot of people, this is their treatment team, like their therapist and or their dietitian. Accountability is really important for our progress in recovery and maintaining motivation in recovery. I think a lot of people think of accountability, especially in working with the dietitian, like, oh no, I didn't do this or that with what I was supposed to do with food. Or if you have a meal plan, oh, I didn't do whatever with my meal plan. But accountability also is that person checking in and saying, yeah, you did this part of it great. You did all of this great. You did it great for a few days out of the days that we were trying it. So accountability just means that somebody is keeping track of your progress. It doesn't necessarily mean someone is there only to point out the ways in which it's not going well. This again plays into that concept of it's really hard for people to stay motivated and to get motivated and unstuck if no one else knows what's going on for you. So you need to figure out who in your life is going to play that role of also keeping you accountable. This could be maybe some of the people in step 2, which is adding more support. Maybe you do have a friend and you hold each other accountable and support each other by making sure that you go to group therapy together, or you go to meetings together, or you both are keeping up on going to your dietitian appointments or whatever. You have some meals together every now and then. So definitely increasing accountability can help maintain your motivation because you have somebody in on the process and also somebody there to notice when you are making progress. Which leads me to my last point, which is counting your wins. This is one of the most common things I see with people that I work with individually and in groups in my practice, is that people do not give themselves credit for the progress that they are making. This is extremely problematic as a general pattern, but specifically in recovery, which can just be such a grind sometimes. Because if you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, why would you stay motivated to keep going? Like that sounds exhausting. So one of the things I do with folks is we need to point out your wins. Like, we need to consistently, regularly list out all the ways that you're doing a great job and that you are making progress. And most of the time when I point this out to the people that I work with, I get a lot of eye rolls and sighs and hemming and hawing about how they don't feel like they're making progress. And that's not to minimize how difficult the circumstance is, but both things are true, right? Things can be really hard and you can make a lot of progress. And I know there are probably some people out there who are really struggling, who are listening to this right now saying like, I really don't feel like I'm making any progress at all. And in those circumstances, I say, okay, well, we have to way back up here and go way back and get real basic with this, which is the first win you can always count is, hey, you're alive today. You survived the eating disorder for another day. That's an enormous win. And then move up from there. Okay, the eating disorder didn't get worse overall today. Great. You didn't have to go to higher level of care today. Awesome. You did one seemingly small thing differently or better today. That's freaking amazing. You stayed sober. That's great. You have other things in your life going well. You didn't get fired from your job. Great. We have to count all of those things too, because even surviving day to day, getting through the day to day while you're wrestling with an eating disorder is a really, really big deal. And you need to give yourself a pat on the back. When we regularly look for our wins and the ways in which we are getting better, it's not invalidating of the things that are hard, but it nurtures the part of you that is trying to recover. It's nurturing to that part of you that is working so hard to get to this place of recovery. And it's really validating to see your progress. So if you think about it, like when we teach kids to do things, let's say that it's a really difficult thing. Maybe let's think about teaching a kid to ride a bike or something. If we were teaching a kid to ride a bike and they found it to be really frustrating and scary and they didn't want to do it and they don't want to fall off and it's kind of nasty at first, we wouldn't go through and point out all of the ways that they're falling off the bike and their balance is terrible and, you know, how they shouldn't be scared going through that. What we do is we get really excited every time that kid rides their bike on their own straight for 2 seconds, and we freak out and we celebrate them and we keep going. And what that does for that kiddo is it makes it so that they want to get back on the bike and try to ride it a little longer. And the same premise is true here. So if you do not give yourself credit for your progress, even if it seems like a teeny tiny thing to you, you're not going to stay motivated. You're only going to be thinking about how your balance has been off and all the things that you've, quote, messed up with your meal plan or whatever. This is another place where your support people are really important. It's so helpful, especially if you're working with professionals like your therapist and dietitian or psychiatrist, family therapist, whomever, to say, I really need to take more time in my sessions to point out my wins because that keeps me going. And it makes me feel like I'm making progress. When I feel like I'm making progress, I feel like I can do recovery because you can. And honestly, as a professional, I will tell you that is one of my favorite things to do with people is to point out the ways in which they are making progress. And again, it's not to minimize or deny or trivialize the struggles that people are having, but it's to point out the other side that we don't pay attention to often enough. There's actually a whole chapter in my book on this, which is called Discounting the Positive. And in CBT and cognitive behavioral therapy, that's considered a cognitive distortion, which means an unhelpful and usually inaccurate way of thinking, which is that you have to give yourself credit for all the things that you're doing right, even if you're looking at the things that aren't going so well. It will really, really, really be helpful. Let me know if you want me to read that chapter for you all too. Maybe that would be helpful to kind of give you an even deeper dive into this. So those are my 4 tips. I'm going to actually give you a 5th bonus one, which is to keep in mind what your values are. If you haven't done a values exploration activity with your therapist, or you haven't gotten a chance to sit down and there's an activity called a values card sort where all these different values like fun, honesty, adventure, kindness, whatever, are written out on cards. You have to go through and sort them so you identify your most important ones. Usually people have you get it down to 3. If you haven't done that, you should definitely do that. There's also a chapter in my book on values too, so maybe I can read that one as well or get that info to you somehow. But keeping the mission statement or keeping the end goal in mind. Like, why would you do all of this really, really, really hard work on yourself that's so grueling? Why? And the answer is values, because you want to have more freedom. Maybe freedom is a value for you. Oh, and I also have a values episode in the podcast. I just remembered. Sorry. I talk about this stuff with clients and on the podcast and with other people so much that it's pretty muddled in my mind, honestly. So if you want more freedom, maybe one of the things is, I don't want to think about food 99% of my day. Great. That's why you're doing this. And keeping your values in mind can help keep you all motivated to go when the going is tough. So I would highly, highly encourage you to really think about your values. Like on those tough days when you're really worn down and you're thinking, why am I bothering to do this at all? Why bother with recovery? Those values are the answer to the question. Yeah, why am I doing this? Oh, because my eating disorder doesn't let me be as kind as I want to be. My eating disorder gets in the way of my relationships. My eating disorder gets in the way of my health and being nice to my body. My eating disorder makes it really difficult for me to be present in my life and to truly connect with other people. All those things really, really count. So on those days when you're just feeling like, oh my gosh, it's not worth it. Why am I putting myself through this? Think about your values, because that's the answer. So I'm going to go over them again real briefly with you. The first one is to adjust your expectations about motivation and to act as if you're motivated instead of waiting for the mood to strike you. Then add in more support, be that support people and or other resources like apps or online resources. Get more accountability, somebody to help you take stock and to give you credit where you're doing well. Counting your wins so you're aware of the progress that you are making, because you are making progress, even if it means just weathering another day. That totally counts. And then lastly, keeping in mind your values, why you're doing this whole deal in the first place. All right, friends, that's all I have for you today. I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining me for another episode. Let's keep in touch. You can find all the information you need about the podcast at eatingdisorderrecoverypodcast.com, including full podcast episodes and links to all of our social media sites. You can join our Facebook group for the podcast by searching Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast on Facebook. This is a closed group for listeners of the podcast looking to connect, share resources, and get involved in a pro-recovery community. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or YouTube. Please leave us a review and let us know how we're doing. Talk to you next time on the Eating Disorder Recovery Podcast.